and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, getting ready to talk about what has got to be one of the most anticipated books for spring 2022. If you love psychological thrillers, if you love contemporary fiction, you have got to get all over this. Also, the audio is outstanding. So let me introduce our power team, a writing duo, Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, the authors of their most recent collaboration, The Golden Couple. It is fabulous. So, ladies, congratulations. And I mean, first, start at the beginning of how you two paired up together, because I find it to be the most fascinating thing how that collaborative effort just works so well. I mean, it blows my mind.
Yeah. This is Greer speaking, and I was an editor at Simon and Schuster for 20 years when an agent sent me Sarah's debut novel, and I loved it. I wasn't alone. A lot of other editors wanted to acquire her book, but I persevered. And we worked together as an editor-author team on 7 or 8 books. Fast forward, I've been an editor for 20 years. I decide that I'm ready to leave corporate publishing. I want to write. I want to try something on my own. But I wasn't telling a lot of people because, it's a very vulnerable thing to say, right? That you want to write. But Sarah and I had gotten really close. We had all of these uncanny similarities. We were the same age. We both are terrible cooks. We both studied psychology and journalism. And so we stayed in touch. We become really good friends. And I confessed this secret to her that I wanted to write. And I even talked to her a little bit about an idea I had. And Sarah is very instinctive and intuitive. And one day she said, we should write a book together. You want to pick it up from there, Sarah?
Yeah, it just came to me. Greer had been, The Wife Between Us was not that idea. She was mentioning it was something separate that she was working on. But, she said, can we, maybe talk about ideas kind of back and forth? And I'll tell you what I'm thinking about, working on. And I love that idea because Greer and I had gotten to be very close as an author-editor team. We would have long dinners in New York and chat on the phone a little bit about our lives. And I tend to get these kind of gut feelings. And, when I get them and they're really strong, I try to listen to them because they almost always lead me to a good place. And I just had this gut feeling, wait a minute, Greer wants to write a book. I love writing books. Let's write a book together. And I just came out with it. And the next day we began.
It's so cool. So you knew, and you knew already that you had this sort of natural language between each other because you had been working so well together. And you mentioned I also am a terrible cook. So we all have that in common. Many, many things in common. But how does the process work? Because you think of writing fiction, writing a novel in particular, as being just such a solitary endeavor. And then finally, the vulnerability of opening it up and sharing those pages with your editor. So when two people are sitting down, is it almost more like a writer's room when somebody is laying out a television show? Or are you doing the outline first and then assigning parts or voices? Or is it all like we're going on a retreat together and we're coming out with the golden couple?
I would say the writer's room is a good analogy. It's sort of a lot of talking about the scenes, and we do try to see them visually before it's time to write. We really like to see them almost like a movie reel and notice everything going on, the smells, the noises, the dialogue, all of that. For me, the big shift was, as you first described it, writing solo novels. It was all internal. It was all in my head, this whole different world and the characters. And I would walk around kind of muttering to myself and always being a little spacey. When I began to write with Greer, it was not thoughts to fingertips. I had to actually articulate all of my thoughts, before we could get things down on the page. So that was probably the biggest learning curve for me.
And for me, I had never done it before. So the whole thing was a giant learning curve. But Sarah and I, our 2 favorite words are what if. And so we would spend, several weeks, months, even before we started the writing, talking about our characters and the plot and just kind of riffing off each other. One person would say, well, what if this? And someone would say, what if that? And then you would know if it was right. Like you'd get this like tingly feeling like, oh my God, I just got chills, and know that then, we were on to something. But it's a lot of talking and brainstorming. And it was super fun. We make each other laugh all day long, even though we're writing these creepy, really disturbing books.
So great, but it's so great to share that journey and to be able to, have that feeling of like high-fiving excitement, like, yes, we're doing it, because I think that's it just feels safer. It feels more supported, of course. And not that you won't both continue to do work independently, but it must be a fun way to go at it. And I'm just curious though, so who is maybe the best under a deadline? Is one of you, are you like very symbiotic and you're both, structured in terms of scheduling, or, I like to run everything down to the wire? I mean, is there somebody who is really keeping track of the calendar, somebody who is more, what has been a challenge to work out?
I feel like I'm a marathoner, and Sarah can definitely sprint more than I can, even to the point where we sometimes on tours we would run together. And I'm like a runner. I've been running for years. And Sarah would be like, I'm going to go for a run with you. And she'd be like out ahead of me. And so I feel like when push comes to shove, like she was a journalist in the newsroom. And so she's a fast thinker, fast writer. So if we're going just on pace, I feel like she's definitely the more of the sprinter, and I think gets less stressed out by deadlines than I do. That's what I would say.
There's a big benefit to coming from the news business. It seems like I have talked to a lot of novelists now who say that, they were used to just writing and churning out material. So they wouldn't allow themselves to get too attached to things. And when a deadline is a deadline, you got to meet it. And so that's a real advantage when you're breaking down a story.
If you've ever had a gruff city editor waiting to get your 10 inches of copy and you're like, the muse isn't here right now. Like, you learn very quickly not to do that. So you learn to get it down on the page. I think for both Greer and I, for Greer coming from the other side as an editor, and for me coming, as a journalist and then writing solo books, we both have a healthy respect for deadlines, and we like to meet them. We know that it will inconvenience a publishing house. There is a whole machine kind of behind your books, and people are waiting to get in the material so that they can do their jobs. But having said that, we also really want our material to be good. So if it's not up to the level that we're both happy with, there was one book when we were kind of pushing back against a deadline and just saying, this isn't working. We're going to have to tear up these 200 pages and go back in and rewrite them. And that was a sacrifice we made, but we made it consciously.
Well, speaking of good and when things are ready, I mean, you have got to feel fantastic about the golden couple. So I want each of you to give our listeners the explanation of why. I mean, this book is everything that I love in a book. It is so much fun. It's so the characters are fantastic, and I could just see it all. I mean, you talked about visuals. I felt like I was watching them the entire time. So give us an introduction to the golden couple.
Well, I like to say that it combines, it's kind of like a best of our work, because we've got kind of a complicated marriage and a maverick therapist. So it's kind of like the Wife Between Us marriage. You've got the therapy from You Are Not Alone, but in a completely different book. So you have Avery, who is this maverick therapist. She has this 10-session method. If she doesn't think she can fix you in that time frame, she's not going to take you on, but you have to abide by her rules. And then you have Marissa, who's kind of every woman in a marriage brings her husband into therapy. He thinks they're going to talk about their son. And no spoilers, but basically on page 3, she says, I brought you here because I cheated on you.
It's such a good boom bomb, because we feel that we have a picture of these 3 individuals, and of course you just keep surprising us, and things just turn and turn and turn like any great suspenseful book does. But you give us so much like right out of the gate. And so, Sarah, let me have you talk a little bit first about, let's talk about Avery. And Avery is just such a phenomenal contrast to Marissa. I mean, we've got these very well-developed, interesting female characters. And I mean, there's a lot happening every time we're in the room with either one of them, never mind when they're together.
Absolutely. Let me just go back 1 minute, because Greer said a second ago it combines complicated marriage, like a wife between us, in the therapy. Greer, you said you are not alone, but actually I know you meant to say of an anonymous girl, just for our readers. We do have time writing about a therapist. This is what co-authors do. We're always
I know, thank you.
filling in the blanks. But
yes,
so Avery, she was such a fun character. And this is what we're hearing from a lot of our readers. They're like, we love Avery. I mean, we kind of pushed the edge a little with Avery. We felt like she was a woman who answered to no one. She was somebody who really charted her own course, and she felt like traditional therapy isn't working for my clients. I can do it better. And I know I'm going to be punished. I'm going to have my license revoked. People aren't going to agree with my methods, but I'm getting things done. And we loved writing her. She was just an amazing character. I think she was complex. She presented in a way in which she was, she's strong, she's tough, like, women are. But she also had a lot of kind of complications within that she didn't let on. When she met with people, she always wanted to be in control. But as a reader, you get to see why she's the way she is, what shaped her, and the things she hides that make her feel vulnerable, because of course we all have that.
And she, as we get to know these characters, of course, there many layers are revealed, and it gives you a great picture of why people are doing what they're doing. But on the surface, she is sort of, she's a rebel, and she almost has nothing to lose. And those are those interesting characters that just keep you on your toes, because you're like, I don't know what the hell's going to happen right now, because this woman is creating a space where she can pretty much do anything. And she's been elevated to a space where people are wanting to pursue the treatment that she is going to offer uniquely. And you're almost not going to challenge that, right? You kind of like walk in almost childlike, because you say, okay, I'm going to go with this, like, off the wall system that she's got. And I just have to say yes to everything. And it's quite a ride.
Thank you.
That's absolutely right. And isn't it kind of, in a way, tempting to think, hey, there could be somebody out there, whatever problems I have, whether it's, issues with my mom or my boss, whatever it is, if I go to her for 10 sessions, she's going to fix it. Like, it might be a pretty tough ride, but at the end, I would do it. Would you?
For me. Yes. Tell me what to do. Yeah.
Tell me what to do.
So in contrast to Avery is Marissa, one half of this beautiful golden couple, the Bishops. So as you guys are coming up with Marissa, tell me about how you're kind of envisioning her, similarities and extreme contrasts to Avery.
I think for Marissa, at least on the outside, right, she has this perfectly curated life. She has the handsome husband and the adorable son and this, boutique. And she just seems like she has this really enviable life. But of course, she's had hardships, that you learn about, and struggles as well. And things are never what they seem. We all look at Instagram, you scroll through, everything looks perfect. And nobody's life is like that. And what's also interesting about Marissa, she was the first mom that we had written, and that was really fun for Sarah and I. Bennett, her 8-year-old, and Sarah and I both have kids, and we both, Sarah's 3 boys, I have 1, so it's super fun to tap into those like maternal instincts of like quizzing your child on the spelling bee and Cub Scouts and all of that world as well.
Oh. The book is just so it's just so much fun, and I am always tremendously shocked when I'll speak to an author and they'll say, something to the effect of like, yeah, I didn't know what was going to happen with so-and-so either. I was totally surprised at the end, how something resolves. So coming from your two perspectives, I imagine collaboratively, you know where your plot is going. I mean, I find it wildly mind-boggling that people can especially do suspense and thriller and not know the destination that we're headed to. So Greer, how about you first and then Sarah? I mean, Greer, I imagine as coming from the editor perspective as well, you want to know where your story is going the second you sit down.
Well, you want to know, and sometimes you might think you know, but I would say in most of our books, we've actually been, maybe in half the books, we've been a little bit surprised about where the story has taken us because things evolve along the way and you make conscious and unconscious decisions that affect the outcome of your characters. And in fact, The Wife Between Us, we rewrote that ending several different ways. So, yeah, you'd think we had it all plotted out, but from my perspective, we don't always. I'm curious how Sarah's going to answer this.
I always compare it to taking a road trip. You kind of have a general idea of the path, but part of the fun along the way is exploring that funky old museum with the world's biggest ball of twine and stopping at that rest stop and, getting served a hot fudge sundae, whatever it is. Like the discovery along the way, I think really makes it exciting for our writers. So we do like to have an outline and kind of a general idea, maybe more of a synopsis than an outline. We don't have every chapter plotted out, but we are very open to throwing it out. As Greer said, the third act of The Wife Between Us, when we sold that book, we said the whole third act is going to be told in letters. It's all going to be letters back and forth. And clearly there's one letter maybe in there, that didn't happen. So you've got to be open. I think you have to be fluid, just be nimble as a writer and constantly ask yourself, like, what is going to be the next best, most interesting, most twisty, most exciting thing that's going to happen?
It is twisty is the perfect word to describe this book because it is, I mean, this is absolutely my number one style of book that I just enjoy so much. I mean, it gives you everything and puts your mind on fire just getting so involved with these people. Obviously, it's already a highly anticipated book that released March the 8th. How do you feel at this stage in your collaboration and your careers when the expectations are so high for a book and people are completely pumped up to devour it? Is that thrilling? Is there an element that makes it a little bit nerve-wracking? Is it you just, what's the ride like from this point on?
I think it's kind of there was such high expectations after The Wife Between Us, and we were both really nervous and excited for that second book. And then COVID hit during our third book, and that I think changed everything for Sarah and I, and just being like just so grateful that we can be doing this and having our book work. Look, everything seems like the stars are aligned. We have everything going for this book. I'd be surprised if it doesn't do well, but we're just so happy to hear that it's connecting with readers now and resonating with people. That sort of has shifted a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like, the great joy of all of this is not selling a certain number of books or getting on a bestseller list. It's the writing, like the love affair with writing, and it's messy and it's complicated and it's exhilarating and it's frustrating. And once you're done with that part, then you connect with readers and they take your book and they, bounce it back to you and say, no, here's what I like. And, oh, this character drove me crazy. And, how did you think of this? And so it's really, that is the most rewarding and creative part. And I think just, going along, just keeping that in the forefront. That's why we do this.
Mm-hmm. The consumer world has changed so much, especially during the course of the pandemic. I mean, we've been able to reach out through Zoom and through everything else to connect with authors. Everybody, I mean, there's such a huge social media presence for books and readers. I mean, that's just a whole life of its own. I'm curious, like, how much the business of books has changed over the last couple of years, and what is your take on it? I mean, Greer, especially coming from, say, the publishing background, I mean, Bookstagram and Book Talk can make or break novels and careers, it's really wild. So, I mean, the reader has more power than ever before, I guess.
It does. It makes it in some ways just so much more democratic, and things can kind of bubble up, from in a grassroots way. I mean, yeah, when I left publishing, I mean, I don't even know if there was Instagram at that point, So, and in the past 2 years, I think, look, we had to cancel our tour for our third book midway through, and there was not this way to connect with readers. Zoom wasn't even a word we were, familiar with. And so now, there's pros and cons, right? We can sit here in our, separate cities and be interviewed by you and so many people. It's so much, there's such a broader reach. On the flip side, Sarah and I were talking earlier, like we do miss those in-person events and connecting with readers, seeing their expression when you're reading something or laughing. So there's pros and cons to all of it. And there is a lot more work on the back end in terms of what we're bringing to the table with social media, for sure.
Yeah, that's a whole other part of your job now, right? It's like
it's becoming it. Yes.
Sarah, let me ask you guys. So, as a partnership, what would be the quality? Say you have to use each other as inspiration for characters in your next book. Maybe you have used each other as inspiration in your books already. If you want to have one little, it could be even just a habit or something of Greer's that you want to use maybe for your heroine, and then maybe something that you could utilize for a realistic villain. What would you pull?
Oh.
Well, there are no qualities in Greer that would make a good villain, but I do have a quirk of hers that I could use for a character. So if Greer is in a hotel room, she cannot stand to have trash in her room because she comes from New York and, apartments and bugs and all that. So if she gets like a snack, you cannot throw your trash out, in the trash can in the room. It has to be taken out of the room and disposed of. And I always think that's hilarious, So that's a Greer quirk. Try to say that.
A Greer quirk. Well, it's funny. I could echo. It's funny when you travel with someone, you do learn their quirks, because Sarah won't put her bare feet on the carpet of a hotel room, which I think is a lot more common. And somehow I'm not skeeved out by that. It's just funny what you bring to the table. But I feel like what I was going to say about Sarah is the kind of person, like if there's an animal in need or a child, and this has happened to us in when we've been together, like child falls off the skateboard, or she's like Wendy in Peter Pan and is always there to save the day. And so that's what I would put in that character, like that there's something happens and there she like appears and makes it all better for everybody. It's like sprinkling fairy dust.
It's a good quality to have in a writing partner or a travel partner as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Ladies, last thing, many people who listen, I mean, we love books and we have these secret dreams of maybe being a writer someday. And, it almost becomes even more of a scary fantasy the more that you read, because as you read great books, it just becomes like, it seems to be psychologically so out of reach, so scary to even want to try to go there. So each of you, what would you say is your number one little bit of advice to somebody who is thinking about just starting to try to put down some kind of story that they've got brewing in their head? And also, what would you say to somebody who maybe through the course of busy life has lost their love of reading? I'll hear that from women who come into my book club and like, I used to love to read and it gave me so much joy. And I haven't given myself that time over the last few years because of kids or work and, XYZ. So, it's a gift that you can reconnect to. So if you have somebody who wants to write, and then if you have somebody who also needs a nudge in giving themselves the time to enjoy reading.
I mean, I think that the answer is kind of the same for both. Like you have to make that, were you going to say that too, Greer? Yeah, you have to make the time. For me with writing, I've always said, like, don't make it too precious. Don't feel like you need the perfect room, the perfect latte, the perfect song on the radio. Like it can be gritty and dirty and you can throw down the ugliest page in the world. You can always edit it. You can always fix that page, but you can't work with a blank page. So, set a time. Maybe your golden time is in the morning. Notice how I slipped in golden there? A little shameless plug. Um, but maybe it's in the morning, right when you wake up. That's my time. I like to have a fresh, clean slate of a mind. Maybe it's at night before you're going to bed. A lot of writers write that way. Whatever it is, find that time, make it sacred. Maybe it's half an hour, maybe it's 15 minutes, whatever you can carve. That would be my tip.
Unsurprisingly, maybe I've just same exact tip. And for writing and for reading, sometimes you have to schedule, like anything that can happen any day can often happens on no days. So if you can just say, even if and a lot of people, look, they've got kids, they've got jobs, it can be really hard to find time to do anything for yourself. But even if you can just find that half an hour and just put it in your book and, in your planner and make that, sacred. And I think once you start, I can't speak to writing, but certainly for reading, I feel like once someone picks up a book, they will get lost in that book, and they'll reconnect with that love. Writing's a whole other area, but for reading, just find that time, even 15 minutes.
And I would also say I wrote part of my first book at Chuck E. Cheese's. I had
yes, you did.
Kids. I would bring my laptop to Chuck E. Cheese because it was the only way I could get peace. And I would have a pile of tokens. I'd be facing the exit, and my kids would have to come to me every time they wanted a token, which was every 30 seconds. And I would sit there writing away, token, write a line, token, like make it part of your life. Bring your laptop to soccer practice, bring it to work and use it on your lunch hour. Whenever you can squeeze in writing in the cracks of life, try to do it.
Oh, that is great. Great advice. And I think maybe that's the only time in the history of the world that the word peace has been used in a sentence with Chuck E. Cheese. Because I can just hear all the noise right now and I'm like stressed out. But I also think there's a boldness to when we have a dream, we're often very secretive about it. And so, Greer, even when you said when you were ready to say, I'm ready to write, it's like, we're hiding it when you should just be out and about. Like this is what I'm doing. And everywhere I look, I'm getting inspiration for this next thing I'm doing that's also going to be part of me, whether it's technically successful or not. So I love that. Ladies, the book is so fantastic. And I had the pleasure of being able to listen to it on audio along with, which is to go back and forth is the greatest thing in the world. And the audio performers are so fantastic.
They're amazing. We got so lucky when they told us.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, really, really great. So the golden couple, Greer Hendricks, Sarah Pekkanen, thank you very much for talking with me today. And congratulations on a phenomenal book again. It is time for a moment with Margaret, and the golden couple. Absolutely love that book.
Loved it.
Right up our alley. So what else are you adding to your TBR?
Well, first off, I did audiobook on that.
The audio's good.
Loved it. So 3 books I'm looking forward to. The Sweet Spot by Trish Doller. She wrote the author. She's author of Float Plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's 4.19 average rating.
Mm-hmm.
This is a single mom who gets fired from her job for something she didn't do. And then she finds out about this new job at a brewery hotel on an island. And of course, there's a man, as there always is in a rom-com. And he helps her to rebuild her life. What does that mean? I don't know, but I bet it gets spicy. But I mean, 4.19, that's pretty high for a rom-com.
And you know what? I bought Float Plan and I never read it. Isn't that a shame? It's actually, I can picture exactly where it is.
Oh, yeah.
On my dresser in my room, which is like a space of importance, like it's migrating toward me. And I heard
it's the TBR like back bench.
Yeah, it's like, it's here. It's here.
If it's in my living room, on the bookshelf in my living room, it's not coming anywhere near me unless I've already read it.
Right.
It's got to be in the stack next to my bed, or it has to be in my Kindle, which that's usually what gets precedent.
Right. Okay, that sounds good.
Something that I have requested on NetGalley for audio is The Book of Souls by Kevin Moore. It's a horror. And it's actually got a 4.47 on Goodreads, which is very high. This is a guy who has a near-death experience and gives him all sorts of abilities. Like he can read people's minds and he can hear and see people who have already passed. And then he helps them cross over. But there's some other piece to it that I had a hard time understanding the description of. So maybe when I read it, or it's read to me, that I will have a little bit more insight. But it's one of 2 books. The second book, that's called The Book of Demons, will come out later this year. So it's part 1 of this 2-part situation. Nice. But Book of Souls and Book of Demons sounds like good versus bad coming up, and that's very interesting. It also kind of reminds me of that CBS sitcom that's a BBC adaptation, Ghosts. Have you watched that?
I've only watched 1 episode, but I absolutely love it.
I know a lot of people who are like, no,
I loved it.
I think it's adorable.
It was so funny. It's so funny and charming. And the main guy, he's I love him. He is oh my gosh, from Freestyle Love Supreme.
Yeah. And which you love. And I can't remember his name right now or his character's name, but he's the soldier.
Oh yeah.
That he has the British soldier that's on. Yeah. I love him. He's hilarious. So I really enjoy it.
It's cute.
Yeah. And I was really upset when, I was home in California for a bit, and the Olympics were on one station, so none of the other stations were putting out any new shows during that time, because it's like they're competing with the Olympics, which is really hard to compete with. And I was super upset there were no new episodes of Ghosts for like 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I was like, where are my episodes? It's finally back. Anyway.
Nice.
And then Smile and Look Pretty by Amanda Pellegrino, which we both marked for Goodreads. It's just under 4 stars there. But this is like a fiction workplace thriller, and I'm actually excited because it sounds a little bit like The Whisper Network.
Yes, it does.
And this is a debut novel, so it's a group of friends who are assistants to powerful men in the entertainment business, and they start a blog about their experiences that then go viral, and then they have to deal with all the consequences of that. That feels very contemporary of, like, the Me Too movement has to be crossed in there somewhere. I've had that. I requested that on NetGalley like a year ago, I think, and I haven't had a chance to read it. And so now I read that little synopsis and I went, okay, it's calling to me now.
Oh yeah, it sounds really good. Yeah. And coming from LA, and I graduated from UCLA, and so many people go into the entertainment industry, and the stories that you hear of anybody from, working the desks of fill in the blank in agencies and in production companies and all of it, it's ripe for good drama.
I would really hope that the news industry is not as brazen as what happens in the entertainment industry, but it's very similar in the idea that it's a lot about who you know. You try not to burn bridges anywhere unless you're really ready to light that fire, because the connections, it's such a small world within this industry. And I feel like that's why a lot of the problems happen in the entertainment industry, because you don't want to put somebody off because people don't get in.
Everybody knows everybody.
Yes. And if you upset one person, you've upset the whole chain that is linked to them. So I can't wait to read that.
Yes. Yeah, lots. And that seems like a good sitting outside by the pool kind of.
Yes. The cover's great too.
Yes.
Little sunglasses moment, I think.
Cool. All right.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing how you feel about all of these books on your tall, tall, tall TBR.
So tall.
Happy reading, everybody. Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.